Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Ryan Sagare, and I am one of the co-founders of School Rubric, a global platform where educators, parents, and students share their school stories with the world, and that's exactly what we're here to do today. Today, we have two extraordinary guests, two school leaders, and I'm going to bring them on in just a 1 minute, and they're going to be talking about this book that you see on the screen right now, The 5Essentials, a playbook for school leaders. But before we get into meeting our speakers today and the book, I want to go through a few things. So first of all, I want to welcome you all. Thank you for being here. This webinar is meant to be a conversation. It's not about theory. It's not about another framework to add to your stack. It is really about the hard, practical, day-to-day work of building schools that actually get better and stay better over time. We are joined by, of course, the two authors who are two doctors and me, who is not a doctor. They are going to bring decades of classroom experience, principal office experience, and district leadership into one honest webinar and playbook that we're going to be talking about. So let's get right into it. And before we get into the book, let's talk about who's publishing the story. Of course, this is all brought to you by School Rubric, which is a global nonprofit connecting educators across every continent to share what works and amplify voices that often go unheard. And we are built on some of the things that you see on the screen right there, those four principles: connection over competition, a global perspective, equity and amplification, and continuous learning. The mission of simple, bridge classroom cultures and continents so every student gets the best possible educations. And that's the lens we're going to be looking at everything we do today. And I am very passionate about all this. And you can see that through my experience that these things that you see on screens really, to me, embody what it means to be a good educator and learning. And it's really about sharing everyone's perspective and getting everybody's voice into the room. And that's what we're going to be doing today. Before we bring on our guest, I just want to say special thank you for all of you being here. And without further ado, let's bring on our first speaker, Prybil. And Brian brings, man, if you look at his resume, a lot of experience, whether it's from being a teacher, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and is currently the deputy superintendent of Moline-Coal Valley. His career has taken him through every level of the school system. So I'm going to bring Brian on along with our other speaker, Robert, who I will give you the introduction in just 1 minute. But Brian, maybe you could just share some more insights about what you actually do now.
Yeah, so currently I'm acting deputy superintendent for Moline-Coal Valley School District. As you mentioned, I've had the blessing to serve many roles as an educator, and I'm actually going into my 28th year. And, you know, one thing about Moline-Coal Valley that I absolutely love is in Illinois, we're the 27th biggest school district. So we're not too big, but we're big enough. And I'm really proud to share with you today the work we've done in Moline-Coal Valley, which helped us create this book that we're going to be talking
there's
about.
a lot of wisdom that you get from how many years did you say in the schools?
28 years.
My goodness, good for you, Brian. Well, we're excited to have you, Brian, and we're also joined by your partner in crime with this book, who's also a big advocate for School Rubric and has done so much for School Rubric. We're joined by Robert Thornell, and he is a former deputy superintendent, nationally recognized leadership coach. We'll get into his books in a second. The guy goes fast and moves all the time. He is one of the authors of this book that we'll be talking today about. And Robert, we're going to talk about a lot of things today, but maybe you could just tell some people a little bit about yourself. There's many things I can tell people, but let's see what you'll give the audience today.
Well, it's great to be back at School Rubric. And, you know, it's done so much for me, including publishing 2 previous books. But I would say that, you know, one of the things that I love about going around the country and working with schools is just the perspective that I get. And, you know, making the world a smaller place is something that, you know, we talk about a lot, and learning from each other. And so that's what we try to do. So, whether it's Moline-Coal Valley in Illinois or anywhere else in the world, we want to help make everybody better. So,
well, speaking of which, I know you're on the road a lot and you're getting ready to
yeah.
go somewhere else. So where did you
Yeah.
come back from, and where are you
So,
going next?
this past week, I had an amazing experience. I actually did the convocation keynote in Tuba City, Arizona, which is on an actual Indian reservation, Navajo Indian reservation. And so got to meet a lot of great people there and just see a world in a different point of view than I'd ever
Brian,
experienced.
how much you want to bet that Robert brought something on stage to juggle?
I did.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And he does it with such finesse.
We did juggle. But the best part is I left with turquoise cufflinks that they gave me, the Navajo tribe gave me.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I'm ready to wear those.
We're going to get into the juggling and some of your other books, but let's get to the book that we're here to talk about today. Sure. And I'm going to kind of break it down before we get into the questions. So we've outlined this where we've got some questions that we're going to use to prompt us and get some insights about the book. But before we get into the questions, I want to give everyone in the audience just a quick sense of what this book actually is, because it is different from most books out there about school leadership. So I'm going to try and explain it. These guys are going to keep me in check if I get something wrong. But it starts with the problem. Most schools already know what works. The right ideas are not what's missing. What they lack is the capacity to do those things consistently, to execute week after week. I didn't mention this in my intro, but I've been I taught for over 10 years and have seen this firsthand. It's really how do you execute, and then how do you make them consistently over time. The framework which this is built on, which is very interesting and something that I enjoyed about the book, it's obviously research backed from the University of Chicago, and the book 5Essentials basically breaks down, names 5 conditions every strong school shares: effective leaders, collaborative teachers, a supportive environment, ambitious instruction, and involved families. So that's really what we're going to be, the framework that's surrounding this. And then the question and the playbook that is going to be answered is, the question is, where this playbook comes from is the 6 essential is basically, the question comes, how do you actually build the conditions that are able to scale the things that and do things consistently. And what this book does is it's created really this 6 essential, which is basically the playbook that has all of these plays done as chapters, each one connecting with research and allowing educators really just an area where they can go and find things that they can bring into the classroom immediately. And then that 6 essential itself, well, that is the leadership capacity to take those 5 conditions and turn them into clear actions, consistent practice, and sustainable improvement over time. It's not a one-time push. This is a repeatable, disciplined leadership. I think I got most of that right, guys.
Sure.
How did I do?
Sure. It's great. We can do it very simple. This is the how to do it, right? We all know the research is pretty clear on effective schools. You need good leaders and good teachers and all the things that go with it. The successful schools, in my opinion, are the ones that have figured out how to actually do that. And that's kind of what, in Moline-Coal Valley is an example of that. They have figured that out. And so we wanted to share some of their story. And some of these plays are plays that everybody will know. It's just how do you execute them. And so.
Well, I think with all the schools that you visit, Robert, and the 20 plus years of Brian's experience in the school, I can say that you guys have seen a lot of what's been going on in the school. So let's get right to the question. So I guess really quickly, I mean, the first thing you'll notice about this book is that it's not like a traditional book. As I mentioned, it's these different plays that are brought into chapters. So let's start there. Why did you decide to write this as a playbook rather than as a book about just school leadership?
Let me go, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead. Take it.
No, I'm just going to say I consider myself a principal coach. That's kind of what I consider I call my title nowadays, Ryan. And, Brian and I started talking about, we're both sports fans and everything. So how do we coach people to do some of these things? And, every coach has a different philosophy, offense, defense, everything like that. But this became that, how do I actually implement these ideas? And so that's what I do naturally in my career. That's what Brian, I've seen his leadership style. That's what he does all the time too, is we're working with these people, not as direct supervisors, coming down on them, but as coach side by side them in the work. So that's that's my reason anyway. And Brian, I know will add to that.
Yeah, I would say that, the book really grew out of a real need for district improvement work, selfishly thinking about our team here at Moline-Coal Valley and giving them the tools and those ideas so that they can hit the ground running. Because being a larger district, we have a lot of turnover in administration, and being a principal is tough. And we developed this playbook so that it takes the research, the 5 essentials, like you mentioned, Ryan, about, those conditions that schools need to have to be organized for improvement. And we tied it to that and gave some real actionable plays that will help leaders organize their buildings for improvement, which ultimately leads to that student achievement piece, what we're trying to all accomplish in education today.
And so was that, I guess, that final decision, did you just kind of naturally was there just a moment where you both looked at each other and like, hey, let's not do chapter book, let's do something that people can quickly grab and be able to leverage right away?
I think one of the things that when Rob and I first met and we started working together, he had made a comment to me like, hey, there's some really good things here happening within our district. And, he said, hey, you need to put this into a book so that, it can't be person dependent, right? As a district, we want systems in place. And I think that's one of the things that really sticks out with me, making it practical, not too much theory. People know what works. People want to know how to do it and connect the research to the actual work. And I think that's where, as Rob mentioned, we're both coaches in that sense, and trying to eliminate as many barriers as we can for educators so that they can show up and make the biggest impact with their students within the time frame that we're given every year.
I think if I can throw one more thing out there, Ryan, before we go off from this, it's also written in a way that just like a kind of like a playbook for a sports team is different situations call for different plays. And so a school might really be focused on ambitious instruction. They can go just to that chapter and look at those plays. Another one might really be focused on parent involvement. You don't have to read it straight through page for page. You need to kind of know the context, know the game you're playing, if you will, and then you can pick it up and go from there. So I think from that standpoint, it's a little bit different, but also can be hopefully a useful resource for principals of all experience levels.
Yeah, what I enjoyed about it is the kind of what you said is there's the ability to kind of find specific things that you're looking for, and you go right to that and quickly get it and be able to apply it to what you're doing. And I often look at myself in terms of I've done a lot of received a lot of coaching as I've gotten older, which I wish I would have done when I was younger, and it's been so helpful. And that's just another way of getting the coaching out to more hands. And I think that kind of is a good segue to talking about capacity, right? So what do we mean by building capacity, and why does it deserve to be called the 6th essential? And so I'll just leave it like that and let one of you give it your best shot. You want to start, Brian?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I think one of the things that when you really understand what the 5 essential, those conditions mean, and then you look at the core measures. One thing about this playbook is you can go in and you can look at effective leaders and then those specific core measures that the 5 essentials talks about. And the 6th essential is really the idea of execution, and not relying on a hero leader or that one great leader that just goes out of their way. And there's a lot of educators out there that, that just you put them in the right position and they are going to be successful. But in Moline-Coal Valley, we couldn't really rely on that. We have 10 elementaries, 2 middle schools, a high school, and we have a lot of change over time, year to year. And we wanted to work on a system that wasn't dependent on an individual, that was focused on research, because we want to invest our time in things that matter, that are going to make changes. We're not changing, or we're not chasing just things like the next idea. We're trying to put our efforts into what research says is going to organize our schools for improvement. And the 6 Essential really was born out of the idea that execution. And when you say capacity, it's understanding the research, building the capacity in the leaders to understand what that research says and what it means across a district. And so that it's not just a term, it's not just a vision statement, it's actually a way of how we do business in our district. And when we put goals out there and plans and make a commitment to execute through these things, people know that's what we're going to be focusing on within a given year, and we're going to make that happen, and we're going to report back on how we did.
Yeah, and I just to follow up with that, Brian, maybe, I mean, I've just put the slide up here. Maybe you could just kind of, for the audience sake, is like, I mean, let's really define, I know you kind of sent these bullets over ahead of time, but let's define what you mean by capacity even.
Yeah, I think when you talk about capacity, when you look at the slide here, you get stronger over time, right? You're helping, being a teacher or a leader, depending on your role, whether it's district, individual building, you're working for a common, for those common goals, right? Effective leaders aren't just principals. They are your teacher leaders as well, because systems have to survive any one individual. And when you think about that capacity piece, think about a district that changes over teachers every year. They come into that district. How do those new teachers know what matters? Oh, well, you can have a strategic plan, you can have vision statements, but actually taking that and understanding why we do what we do around those 5 essentials, having those, what's a supportive environment look like? What's it mean for teachers to be collaborative? What's it mean to have families involved? And when you talk about ambitious instruction, that's where it's all at, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I think is important. When you talk about that capacity piece, it's not just any one educator within the system. The capacity comes from the system and building around what research says is going to work, right? Like, and that's important. And because in my 28 years of education, as we mentioned earlier, I never felt like we were getting traction, true traction, and I think this is now more than ever at Moline-Coal Valley. You can go across our system and you can ask our teachers, you can ask our parents, you can talk to students, and they're going to be able to talk about the 5 essentials. They're going to be able to talk about our PACE goals. And that's that capacity piece and executing through with what you say you're going to focus on and improve on, and then show the results. Yeah.
Go ahead, Robert. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, both Brian and I have hired many educators for different roles, teachers, principals, whatever. Unfortunately, we've had to probably remove a few as well. And I think one of the questions I've always had in my mind as I was building school leaders is, what is that it factor? I've gotten it wrong and I've gotten it right. And this idea of how can we help get it wrong less? It's almost kind of what we're thinking. I'd say, why is one school in the same district that people went to the same training, one school is getting drastically different results than the other? That's not just on the kids, that's the adults too. So how do we do that? And so that's part of what it means to me, is kind of closing that gap, whether it's a teaching gap or a leadership gap or anything in between.
Yeah, and Brian brought up actually an interesting point when he was just answering the question of what capacity means and how that's like, you've got some things listed out here, but what that means for every school looks a little different, right? And yes. So I think, like as you said, Robert, like you've been to many different schools, put many people in different positions, and sometimes you might have the perfect teacher, but just for that environment, it just may not be the right fit, right? So
exactly right.
I think that was really, I'm really curious as though, like, when we define capacity that way and you say it means something different for every school, that's where I think also the challenges become with schools for actually to create consistent, scalable, meaningful impact. So I do want to get into those questions, but or into that a little bit more. But let's go ahead to question number 3, which let's put a microscope on Moline-Coal Valley.
There you go, Brian. You've already talked about it some.
I do know that this has shaped a lot of the experience, and of course, Robert, you coming from all of the other schools. But let's talk specifically about Moline-Coal Valley, and Brian, take it away.
Yeah, I think one of the big pieces for us was in 2019 when our superintendent, Dr. Rachel Savage, came to our district. One thing she brought with her was a strategic plan format, and it was called PACE. And if you throw the slide up here, I don't know if I can show you, but yeah, there it is. It's people, achievement, community, environment. And this is a very simplistic format, but really in Moline-Coal Valley, this was something that helped us obtain that movement to focus on certain goals based on this framework. Very simple, right? Like, people, we're a people business. Achievement is what we're working to obtain with our students and help them grow. There's a community around every school, and the environment in which everything happens in. And so, we took that, and that is where we started, and that was our framework. And in Illinois, the 5Essentials survey is something that was mandated from the state, and we've been using it, but we weren't really using it, right? We weren't using it to the level of understanding it. It was more of a compliance piece. So the challenge was for us is really we started to see some nice movement in terms of using our PACE framework, but it was also like the practices that was connecting back that were consistent. And we, like Rob said, we had pockets of excellence going on. In a district, there's nothing more frustrating when you have, for example, say 10 elementaries, and you have a couple elementaries hitting out of the park, and they're doing really well. But as a parent, even as a student in that community, you're like, well, geez, what's going on in those two schools? That's not happening in my school. And that's really a challenge. And when you think about it, in education, we try to kind of minimize that a little bit. We try to say, well, our school's different. And we try to break that down, and I don't want to say dismiss it, but that happens a lot. And one of the things that we were trying to do with the book is really try to connect, where the book came from, really our district priorities, the focus on school improvement, how we embed professional learning with that, and how do we develop our leaders? And again, our leaders, including our teachers, and focusing that around evidence. And that's really what we were working on in Moline-Coal Valley, kind of how this merger with our strategic plan, our PACE, and our 5 Essential framework came to be.
And I put up a nice little slide that kind of outlines how you've kind of put those together.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think when we know what matters, and we know that, like, the connection is, it matters, but then sometimes we never just get over the fact that the recipe to make that matter, or how do you implement that? How do you build teacher to teacher trust if you don't have it? How do if you're not measuring that, how are you're going to need to improve it? And there's a lot of pieces to me with school improvement that, a lot of times we'll focus on a key piece of data, and then next year we might change that data. And I think the one thing about what I love about the 5 Essential framework is that never changes. This is what matters. We may focus on a different core measure. We may even focus on a whole different essential as a building or even as a district, but we're measuring that and we're staying within that framework, and that creates that consistency.
Yep.
Were you going to add something, Robert?
Nope. I just said that's the scoreboard, right? No matter how you go about attacking it, those are the things that are going to matter.
Yeah, well, you brought up like 2 points that I think were pretty interesting to think about, like the challenge that schools face when you've got a few schools in your district doing well and like a few schools that aren't doing well. So, I guess how does that fit into this piece in terms of like how do you identify, or how do you use this framework to sort of, or these essentials to make that not the case, I guess.
Well, I mean, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
No, I was going to say, I envision it two ways. One of the things that we talked about is who's this for? And I think that an individual principal could pick up this book and get some ideas from plays and implement them on their own at a campus, no matter the size of the district or anything like that. But I also think an advantage here is that if I were in a principal supervisory role or a coach role or something, I could also pick up this book, because then it becomes a kind of a playbook, like we call it, to help my principal identify which ones may or may not be the core measures that we need to address and attack. And so I think the resource there to help both an individual that wants to just learn from it, but also somebody that might be responsible for multiple campuses and multiple principals, identifying which one is the best. Because that's what good coaches do. They got to identify the need and then practice it, address it, whatever you want to call it, whatever sports analogy you want to use.
Yeah, and maybe I should have started with the other question I was going to ask related to that, because I've had an interesting, Brian, you mentioned how like it moved from being just a compliance thing to something that like people find meaning in, right? Like, because I saw that often as an educator, right? There are certain things that we do, like for Leave No Child Left Behind, it was like, adding these ridiculously long, what are they? I can't remember what they were called, but like learning objectives that I'd be reading them and like these, I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like the objective, right? But, and that's what I mean. There were some things that I had to do as a teacher that became just compliance things. Like I have to do this, so I'm just going to do that. What was the shift in Coal Valley? What was that shift that stopped being a compliance thing? How'd you get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. Like it is a little bit, you got to keep some score, right? But think about, let's take a basketball team, because that's on our cover. There's 5 players, right? You can have the plays, you can have the offense, you can have the defense. And depending on who you sub in or sub out, depending on who's going to score on that play, there's something to the play, right? It's the structure. It's what the offense that we're running in. And it's the same thing in school improvement. For example, when you tie that improvement to a metric you can actually measure, and you're talking to your teachers, you're talking to your students, you're getting input from parents, all of a sudden now building A is trying to improve on certain metrics within that framework, and then they make noticeable gains. Well, the question is wait a minute, they're within our district, they're within our environment, in our community. What did they do? Then that raises that question, and then the building B, they start to see those plays that what they did. And then that turns into it basically turns into a great PLC, conversation amongst principals, amongst teacher leaders, building leadership teams on, hey, you guys, this is what you guys saw results in. And then pretty soon, building B can take some of those ideas and implement them. I mean, it's really hard in education because there's a lot of different ways to measure success. I mean, just look at all the state standards and the cut scores, even between Iowa and Illinois, we're right on the border, and you can justify it a lot of different ways. And again, it goes back to that autonomy. Maybe the school is higher free and reduced or has more ML students, and we tend to make excuses around that. But see, that's where the research doesn't judge or make those excuses. The research is founded in these are the essential things that successful schools that are organized for improvement have. And again, I go back to the idea, Ryan, because you're asking, because that is the tough part. We stay within that framework. We stay within the offense. We're running those plays within that 5E, going around measurable goals that we can measure based on our survey, based on achievement that we've set within our district. And a lot of districts have those measurable goals, but it's tying it back to that research and then executing that, because I really believe this, and I say this a lot. I've never met an educator, a teacher, a principal that doesn't want to put forth that effort and see the success be there. But not only just be there, but stick and continue from year to year. And I think that's the challenge, because the one thing that we're going to see is every year we're going to get new students. Conditions are going to change, funding levels might change, but trying to stick around that that consistency within that framework. And that goes back to the question about the capacity. Because once you understand that, it's hard to go back and say, we're going to discount, teacher to teacher trust in this building for whatever reason. Like you got to have that. And if you don't have it, you can't make excuses because you don't have it. You have to find ways to build it, to get those teachers working together. And things like that matter. And I think our book does a good job at presenting those types of ideas to build those, that one example. But we have 50 different plays in this book, which is really cool.
Well, I did like the basketball analogy, and I was, you were answering the question, I was also thinking, I mean, there's always going to be those compliance things that you're going to have to do, right? I mean, like it's just not going to go away. I mean, it's in every job, it's everything. And to use your analogy of like calling the play, I mean, there's sometimes when the coach calls the play and you got to do something like I'm not a basketball player, but like you're setting the screen and you want to be the person taking the shot, right? Yeah. Or like, so there's going to be certain roles that maybe that are benefiting the whole team that may not be something that you really believe in or want to do, but you're pushing the team forward. Let's get into our next question, which is, if a school leader, I'm getting ahead of myself. What is one leadership behavior most principals underestimate, and what play addresses it directly? So we're going to get right in and actually get some specific plays, which I want to do. And so who wants to start with this one? Robert, why don't we go to you to start?
Okay. Oh, good. Well, so I will address it, and it actually comes in the section on ambitious instruction, but it's play 19. It talks about building a culture of academic success. And the reason I think that that's underestimated, and some people might raise an eyebrow at that, is everybody talks about that and they talk about a good culture at their school. But a lot of times when I dig in, what they mean by a good culture at school is they have a good culture. We're a family. I hear that phrase all the time. We're a family, or a kid. We love kids. And those are fabulous things, and they are the foundation of a good school. But I think some principals underestimate what it's going to take to be intentional about actually raising the academic success of some of the kids. And that's one of the places that one of the things that I'm proud of is that we've been able to do some of that in Moline-Coal Valley and in other places that I've worked. But you do have to be intentional about instruction.
What does that look like? Not from the data that you're getting, like what does that look like in practice?
In real life? Yeah. Well, it looks like a lot of things. Like I'll give you a perfect example, right? I'll take that we're a family, all right? Well, I don't know about your family, Ryan, but my family doesn't always get along perfectly every time, right? Sometimes, and I have teenagers and stuff like that. Sometimes that means we got to give critical feedback. And underestimating the importance of being able to give critical feedback and still be respected and have a good relationship and like each other so that we're getting better, and not just leave the sticky note that says a great job and pat them on the back and move away when it was not a great job. Now, and I totally agree with Brian 100%. Everybody's trying to do the best they can, but a leader's job is one of their jobs is to help make everybody better. And that's kind of what our book is about. So anyway, I know that's kind of a long-winded one. There's lots of different questions in there, but that one really came to my mind, is just that building culture of academic learning, because I think it is underestimated, believe it or not, even though we're in the school business.
Well, to your point, like I think it gets mixed up in just like you said, culture. Like so, like maybe just the definition of itself, like because you're exactly right. Like hey, we're like it's the same thing. And when you get out of teaching and you get in the workplace, you've got dysfunctional companies that are like, hey, we're all family. Oh, great. Like I don't want to be a part of your family.
Yeah, I got an uncle like you too. But so anyway, that's one that sticks out. I mean, there's a bunch of them, but that one for sure.
Brian, let's go to you. Like what are some of the leadership behaviors that most principals underestimate? And
I think one is just follow through. Leaders often, they ask for input. They communicate priorities. They always introduce the new initiatives. Trust is built by what happens after that, right? Like, did staff get influence on the decision? Did the leader return back to the conversation and follow up? Did the priorities stay important after the first meeting? Does the system provide enough support needed to carry out the initiative, right? Like as a district leader, always look at that. Like if we're asking teachers and principals to do, are we providing that support? Trust grows when people see that consistency between what leaders say and what they do. Communication isn't just the only thing that builds trust. It is following through, being visible, and making sure that you're providing that clarity when needed. It's those little things. And we've got a lot of plays in the book. Play one is called Strengthening Their Voice. It's all about seeking teacher input before making decisions. Building the table together is play two. And it talks about bringing the right people to the table and knowing their strengths, knowing what they can bring to help move the decision forward. And then there's ones I kind of mentioned.
Well, Brian, my next question is going to get into some plays. You guys have already shared. You guys were sharing three. You guys got into like 3 plays you've already shared. Save a little for the next question.
Okay, I'm sorry. I get excited talking about it because it really is.
That was my fault.
Yeah. I was falling off Rob's lead.
We're ingrained in us now.
So I heard getting teacher input. I heard, focusing more on academic culture rather than just culture in general. And then what was the other one that you mentioned there? I know that's sitting around the table. I guess it's input from teachers, but it's really making sure that everybody comes to the room together and every voice is heard.
We called that build the table together. It's not leadership. We like to say it's not about arriving to answers, right? It's creating the ownership that bring people together around the work and the why behind the work. I think that's important. And, I think we do fear change and in education. And it just seems like, I'll never forget my very first year as a principal, I was really excited to go to a professional development. And one of my former teachers who had me, that was my biology teacher, his name was Lynn Orchid. And he laughed. He was laughing at me. And he's like, "What are you so excited?" I go, "This is our first professional development." He goes, "Brian, this is just going to circle around. It'll be called something that we've already done. It'll have a new label to it. And nothing will change."
And that's talk about take the wind out of your sails. Oh my goodness.
That we come up with and we try to do. Like if we give people the sense that we're not investing in things that are going to make a difference, then they're not going to buy into it, and we're going to get what we've gotten. And I think that's important. So that build the table together to me is critical. You've got to know how to do that, and you've got to know your people. And Rob, you want to add to that?
Nope, I'm good. I'm ready for the next one.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, as you were thinking about that, I was thinking, can you hear? You can't hear us?
Yeah.
We can hear you. I can hear you, Brian. Are you not able to hear us, Brian? All right, I'll take a quick moment, and Brian, we'll get your audio situated in just a second. While we're doing that, I do quickly want to, let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about School Rubric for one moment, just while we make sure that we get the audio fixed. For our last question, which I'm going to bring up right now so you can be thinking about it, is if a school leader finishes reading this playbook, what's the first play they should call? I'm going to bring these guys back on screen here in a second and just make sure that their audio is working. So guys, be ready. I'm bringing you on right now. So if you're in the background, let's see if your audio is working.
I'm back.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. Cool. I want to get to this last question. But one thing I wanted to say in regards to what you just were talking about, I remember as a teacher the countless after school teacher development things, and I don't remember. I mean, I remember how many times that it just sort of felt like an afterthought and a waste of time, right? And I really think it would have just like. And I'm sure in the background, what was going on was like principals and people scrambling. Oh my God, we didn't figure something out for today. Let's do this. But to your point, a play just putting people in front of the table with a couple prompts about things would probably be more useful than scheduling, somebody to come talk to me about something that I don't need, or like it's just an afterthought. So let's get into this, which is you finished reading. You've talked about, you guys have already given us 3 plays, so don't give us any more than 2. That'll leave the other 45 for people to read about. But what is if you read the book, what's one place that you would, I mean, all the plays are great, but recommend one that was important to you and or that you've shared with another teacher as something they can read. So it could either where they should go first, or maybe from an experience where you've seen it be meaningful for somebody.
Whew.
Robert, let's go with you.
That's a lot there. I think for me, when I think about this, Brian mentioned the strengthen their voice, but I do think a good school leader finds ways to hear everybody's voice and hear and learn from with and through each other is what I like to call it, and say that about. I think if you think about a school leader when they finish reading this playbook, I think context is important to me. I think the best teachers, the best principals, the best coaches, if you want to say that, and even the best superintendents, they are able to read the room. They're able to know what play to call. I mean, if you're a sports fan at all, play calling is important. It's a skill and it's an art. And I think giving a reader a toolbox, if you will, of different ideas and the different plays that they could call is very important. And I hope that when they finish reading this, that they take 3 or 4 of them that will help their school and implement them. And even better than implement them, improve upon them, right? Change them. I'm going to address this based on the game I'm playing, the context I'm in, and I'm going to make it better. So that's kind of what I hope that they do. But it all starts with strengthening their voice and building trust. I think the best, story after story after story about teams, whether it's sports teams or any other kind of teams, the Navy SEALs comes to mind. They trust each other, that they're going to do the work. And I think it starts by building that, and then you go from there. So I don't know if that totally answers
you can apply that to corporate.
Absolutely.
A lot of items.
Absolutely.
Brian, what's your recommendation?
Well, not too long ago, several years ago, I probably would have just kind of said whatever. All right. Like for what I mean by that is, being really independent about my individual building, for example, if I was a building principal, I would tell people, the leaders out there, is if you're in tune with your measurements and your data, look at your data. What's your data telling you? Right. And then pick an area or two to focus on within that given school year. You don't want to take too much and try to do too much. But honestly, if you're not in that position, and we weren't until we started to really try and put our data together, our strategic plan together with the 5 essentials, and really utilize that at a building level, even into a classroom level with our achievement data. So I would tell them, map the mission. This is about coherence. It's about connecting what your district, your building strategic plan is, your school improvement plan. What are you doing for professional learning? What data are you using in your district? What curriculum? What's your leadership priorities? So map the mission, I would say, it's similar, is get the staff together, right? Get everyone on the same page and know your people, build the trust. You don't want to be initiative overload, right? That's one thing that we have. But mapping the mission really helps leaders, teachers, really simplify what is important. And then it allows the leaders to say, this isn't a separate initiative. I'm not putting this on you. This is something that we're going to connect to our data, and we're going to set some manageable goals and try to improve upon that. And the one thing I want to add is, I think people have to have a realistic expectation, because depending on what you do for those goals and what they look like, ideally, we try to frame our work within that year, knowing that we do have some multi-year goals. But what's important about that work and with Map the Mission is making sure everyone knows when we're measuring, what we're measuring, and what that end goal looks like. So that's where I would start. I think that's a great place to start, because it aligns, it gets everyone on the same page, and we know what the priorities are and how we're going to get there.
So you talked about, from a practical perspective, so you talked about how, hey, we're going to look at the data, and I've obviously the book was just written, so this kind of thinking in terms of, had it been written last year, what would have the data what would have you seen from the data, and what were the things that I think it's really important what you said in terms of not focusing on all of it, right? You got to prioritize these 3 things or these 2 things from a school year. What did that look like for Moline-Coal Valley?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've been very honest with our work is we have multiple measures of student data. One, we use NWA MAP testing. We do that for primarily our K-8 grades. We do it 3 times a year, and it's a nationally normed assessment that we use. But then there's the IAR assessment, which is the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, and there's some other types of assessments that we have available to us. But when you're talking about student achievement, one thing that we found was that we were going after our growth data with our MAP assessment, and we were looking not only from a district average, but we were looking at individual building and what we could do. But really, what we found with that is it ties back to our ambitious instruction. What questions are we asking our students? When we're asking students to do the math problems for daily practice, are we getting to those higher level questions? Because what we found, and be very open about this, our IAR scores, Illinois just kind of adjusted everything, and we really haven't had a focus the way we do going into this year for our 26-27 school year. We are focusing on IAR growth, which is measured at every individual level or individual building. And I would say that, going back to your question, Ryan, there's a lot of different metrics, our graduation rate and things that we've put up there. But we've also, like, one of our goals this year is working on supportive environments. And when you look at supportive environments, there's questions in there that students get asked, like, do they get to create a math problem with their peers? And you think, well, geez, that's pretty simple. But are we giving students an opportunity to do that and really push some of those higher level strategies that research says will help our students achieve?
Yeah, I remember through our previous conversations, we all talked about that piece of like, well, how's the data going to increase like community, right? But there is data, right? And there are things that that information is out there. It may not be like a test score, like a MAP test score, or the Illinois RA test, but there is some data out there to for that, and you can use. It doesn't always have to be a test score, is what I'm getting at. That data comes in all types of forms, and I know that you talked about how you prioritize that with your community through some of the things, through the events you were doing, and how all of this ties in to what we're here to talk about, which is really what it comes down to is we want great learning environments for everyone. I want to make sure that we come back, because we got to our last question. I want to make sure that we do come back to the cover of the book, because I know that you all had some exciting news since the last time I've talked to you. So which one of you wants to talk a little bit about the new foreword for the book and some of the news that is related to that?
Sure. I mean, either one of us. I mean, I think so. Our foreword is written by Dr. Anthony Bryk. He's kind of the godfather of the 5 Essentials, and he does a lot of different things right now. He's working with the Carnegie Foundation, but we got to get on a call with him, and he has given us feedback on the book throughout. And I think one of the things that meant a lot to us was he just thought that he agreed this was the next step, how to execute on the research. And so that is we're pretty excited about that. It was a pretty powerful piece, and I'm sure Brian can add to that. But yeah, that was neat.
Yeah, I think through a simple, we reached out to Dr. Bryk, and it was really interesting because he really pushed us originally to look at this idea. Matter of fact, the idea of what is the 6 essential, him being one of the founding authors of the 5E and the work that he's done with others. And then here you have two guys talking about, this playbook. And it was really an awesome conversation. I mean, he is his guidance in helping us shape, basically connecting that research to the practical extension of that work. In other words, what I mean by that is we were hoping the book would become something connected to the 5E, but to have it really be an extension of here's the how, what research says works. Here is how you do it. That is the ultimate compliment from Dr. Bryk, and we're really just tickled to death that, honestly, that he took the time to write a foreword for this book. And the foreword is, there's a lot of forewords for books, but his foreword is so powerful and it's really great to read. And hopefully anyone watching this gets a chance to read that foreword.
Just for the record, I don't have the foreword in my book. Does that mean I get another one?
Yep.
Okay.
We'll share that with you here.
Well, guys, the book is The 6th Essential, 50 plays, 7 chapters, one powerful idea. Knowing what works is not the same thing as being able to do it. We talked a lot about that today. I put up on the screen, if you want to share or if you want to reach out to these guys, you can find them. Man, you guys are all over the place. Are you posting regularly to all those? That's a lot of work if you're doing 6 social media platforms. But you can find it at The 6th Essential. You can find these guys on LinkedIn. Anything else you guys want to add?
No.
We built this playbook with the idea that hopefully people will read it and they'll have some plays they can share. We'd love to hear some of the success that people take away after reading it to see if it works for them.
Hey, if you're watching this and you've read the book, bring it to the table or build the table. Or is it build the table, bring it to the table? Yeah. Build and bring it to the table all together.
Build the table together. Yeah.
Build the table together. Before we do go, I just want to mention, as we were joined by 2 amazing educators today and professionals, but if anybody watching wants to share your school story, that is what we are all about. If you want to share your own experience as a school leader, a teacher, a parent, I've written several articles. I'm in the, and I'm no longer a teacher. So I guess my point is what you have to say is meaningful and people get a lot out of it. And I'm going to show up the website right here, but you can see all of our books here, but there is also a link for how you can actually share your own stories. But want to encourage you all to check out our School Rubric page, our story, share your story right here. Boom, there it is. You can contribute your own story. I'm also going to bring up the book published that we published various books, and this is my opportunity to highlight Robert Thornell, who has published. This is your 3rd book with School Rubric, Robert?
It is.
So it's 3 total books, and I think let me bring the one cover up that I know I've got on screen. So here are a few of the books that we've got here. Maybe just give a quick plug for the one that I mentioned at the top for keynote, Juggling the Job.
Sure. That's it. It's built on 30 years of experience working with principals, things that work and things that don't. And the juggling job, of course, plays on the metaphor of all the different things that principals have to do. So it's fun. Several of those books are really good. I've had an opportunity to read them. So check out the School Rubric website and take a look.
And don't forget to check out The 6th Essential by Brian Prybil, Robert Thornell, and a foreword by Anthony. And I never get his last name right. It's Bryk, right?
Bryk.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, and I will see you at the next one. Look forward to seeing how the school year goes as you all start and your endeavors. And remember, for all the teachers, principals, administrators out there, if you want to have a little something in your office, in your desk, maybe in your car, if you're looking for some tools to bring to the classroom on how to make really meaningful impact, I recommend the book. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to close her out. Bye now.